This is our last question of the evening.
Oh, lucky me. Hi, Chris. I've been following you for a while, and I'm very glad you're here, and thank you for your great work. Recently, I've become quite interested in tipping points. And how did you see that? Did you see any sort of tipping points in those nonviolent revolutions you covered in Europe, and how they came about, and anything?
Well, that's a fascinating question, because so having covered those revolutions, what I learned is that the purported leaders of the revolution spend all of their time scrambling to understand what's happening. That when people rise up, I mean, remember that the demonstrations in Leipzig began largely led by Lutheran clergy, and their one demand was that the government give them legal status. And it ended with the destruction of the Stasi state and the end of the Berlin Wall. I mean, I was in Leipzig on the afternoon of November 9th with the leaders of the East German Revolution. And one of them said to me, maybe in a year we'll have free passage back and forth across the Berlin Wall. By 7 o'clock that night, the Berlin Wall did not exist as an impediment to human traffic. Lenin, 6 weeks before the Bolshevik Revolution, or the Russian Revolution, gives a speech in Switzerland and said, well, you know, people my age, we won't see the revolution in our lifetime. No one knows. What is the tipping point? It's usually something so mundane, so banal, but it just, it pushes a population over the edge. And no one can predict it. I mean, that's where my hope lies. I know the tinder is there. I don't know what will light it. I don't know when it will be lit, but it's there. And so, I mean, what was moving about the revolution in Czechoslovakia was the figure of Havel, because Havel was a non-person in communist Czechoslovakia. If you wanted to hear Havel, you had to listen to Voice of America. And many of you know the history of Havel and in and out of jail and stuff. And he wasn't a very charismatic speaker or, you know, but he had the moral authority, and everyone in Czechoslovakia knew it. And he had been resisting since Charter 77 for a long time at great personal cost, and they knew he would not sell them out. You know, a population is often more cognizant than it appears on the surface. So a story I have told before, but in Prague that winter, there were posters of Jan Palach all around the city. Now, Jan Palach had been a young Charles University student, had gone to Wenceslas Square to protest the 1968 Soviet invasion and overthrow of Dubček. And he'd lit himself on fire, and 4 days later he died of his burns. His funeral, which attracted hundreds, maybe thousands of students, was never covered by the state media. When he was buried and his grave became a shrine, his body was exhumed and his remains were cremated, his ashes were given to his mother, and she was told she couldn't rebury them. A week after the communist government fell, 10,000 Czechs marched to Red Army Square and renamed it Jan Palach Square. Marta Kubasheva, the great singer who sang A Prayer for Marta, which was the anthem of defiance that was broadcast over the airwaves as the Soviets invaded, once Dubček was overthrown and the pro-Soviet regime was installed, her entire recording stock was destroyed. She was banned from the airwaves, and for the intervening years, she worked on an assembly line at a toy factory. I was in Wenceslas Square with 500,000 Czechs when she walked out on the balcony. In December, it was snowing, and she began to sing the prayer for Marta. And every Czech in the crowd knew every word. That's the power of resistance. It has a moral force. It is, as Daniel Berrigan once told me when I asked him to define faith, it is the belief that the good draws to it the good. And empirically, everything around us may say otherwise. But I believe that that's right, that in the end, resistance against radical evil is an act of faith. It is the belief that the good draws to it the good. It is what Auden calls that ironic point of light that flashes out wherever the just exchange their messages. That our job, even however lonely it may be at that moment, is to keep that narrative alive. And if we can keep that narrative alive, then we can use the word hope.